Velma Silva at velmasilva@sylvan.k12.ca.us. And if you can email her, then we can recognize you at the appropriate time throughout the meeting. At this time, we'd like to report out of closed session. The direction was given to staff on all matters. At this time, I'm going to flip back to my other screen here so I can see my fellow board members. All right, it's time to adopt tonight's agenda. So if I could get a motion for adoption of tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Miyakawa and a second by Mr. Collins. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Harvey.
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay. Did Mrs. Lindsay say aye?
She said aye.
You're on mute, Cindy.
Somebody in the district office, we have more than one computer open.
Board Member Collins.
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa.
Aye.
Board President Roth.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion is carried. The agenda is adopted for the evening. At this time, I ask that you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Very good. Thank you. At this time, we're moving to our communications section of the agenda. Written communications. Mr. Frederickson, are there any written communications for the district?
No, there are not this time.
All right. We will move on to 8B, public hearing and the adoption of resolution 2019-2020. Number 4, resolution to establish temporary interfund transfers of special or restricted fund money for cash flow purposes. At this time, we will open the public hearing. Mrs. Silva, is there any public members that would like to address the board at this time?
There are not.
All right, seeing that there is no public members to address the board regarding the public hearing, we will now close the public hearing and move on to public participation, which is item 8C. Mrs. Silva, are there any members of the public that would like to address the board during public participation?
We do have 3, and Mr. Frederickson will be sharing those this evening.
Okay. Mr. Frederickson, if you would like to read the 3 public participations.
Yes, President Roth. I have our first community member submitted, and this is from Nadine Clevin. And her message states, I am a community member with a grandson who is in the special education program. I am pleading with you to support your special education students as distance learning starts this fall. Witnessing my grandfather's world get turned upside down has been heartbreaking. He was thriving while in school. All special education students deserve to have access to a free and appropriate education. His disabilities prevent him from being able to learn if all of his instruction and services are delivered online. There has to be other options than 100% online. Families of special education students have no idea what the plan is for their students on the first day of school on August 10th. All that has been given is a sample schedule that may not be feasible for students like my grandson. Many families have been asking questions about any kind of response. I am writing to encourage the district to start communicating with special education families about what is happening and to be creative and flexible as to how you can meet each student's needs. They need you more than ever. Our next communication is from Irene Olmos. Good evening, board members and Superintendent Frederickson. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening. I am proud that our district believes in providing an equitable education for all students. I am also a strong believer in doing what's best for children, which brings me to the reason why I chose to address you this evening. My concern lies with the intermediate and high school students who will not be offered the opportunity to have assistance in navigating through the new way of education, distance learning. When this began on March 18th of last year, many students were unsuccessful in navigating this new system. This generation of students may be game and media technology savvy, but they are not familiar with the educational technology they are going to be required to use during distance learning. All students, regardless of age, should have the option of parental guidance at this time. I am asking that you consider allowing staff to bring their children to a self-contained room or be given the option to work from home so that we can provide our children with the opportunity to be academically successful. Sincerely, Irene Olmos. And our third communication was provided by Brandon Joffwell. He is a parent of a student at Orchard Elementary. I would like to address the group on behalf of the Sylvan education community. We are in unprecedented times, and the children who are going to have the most difficult time adjusting to this new normal are currently being ignored by the Sylvan School District. As parents and educators, we have an obligation to serve our special needs students and to provide them with the same opportunities as their typically developing peers. Rather than work to communicate a plan and build a partnership with the district, parents of special needs children, we have been all but left aside to focus on the needs of the general education population. These are your most vulnerable students and your parents who are going to have the hardest time moving to a distance learning model, and they are being ignored. Less than a week from school starting, the only communication that we as parents have received is to date is 45 seconds of an hour-long town hall meeting telling us the district will call to determine a plan after school year starts. Waiting until after the school year starts to start developing and communicating a plan for special education is completely unacceptable and tells me that Sylvan Union School District is discriminating against their most vulnerable population in their greatest time of need. I want to make sure that you are all aware of how this pandemic has been handled with the special education community so far and implore you to take action to communicate, collaborate, and build a plan that will address the needs of this community. Those are our three communications, Board President Raw.
Thank you. Mrs. Silva, are there any other communications that need to be recognized at this time?
Do not have any other ones, Mr. Love.
All right, very good. At this time, we'll move on to information and discussion. We are on item 9A of the agenda, the superintendent's update of the 2020-2021 reopening of schools. Mr. Frederickson.
I'm adjusting my volume there for a second. Thank you. Let me get my okay. First of all, I want to just thank the board for their support during this challenging time. This has been, as I think one of the parents made a comment, that it's unprecedented times. And I just want to, first of all, commend our staff for the work that we've been doing. You know, to think that we pivoted on July 17th from considering moving forward with students coming back for some in-person instruction to 100% distance or online learning, that was a major task. We have been trying to make every effort to, first of all, make sure we have safety protocols in place. And we have been dealing a great deal with that, ensuring that we have the supplies and, again, the protocols that are necessary. And then our next step was to, for sure, move forward with our online learning program. And we have titled that our Sylvan Select model. And again, it is providing, we want to be very different than what was provided last spring in crisis learning. And the Ed Tech Services, Educational Services Department, they have been so busy preparing things for the distance learning. They've been meeting with teacher groups, ad hoc teacher groups, reviewing the schedules, the times, the different asynchronous and synchronous learning patterns. Our technology team, I got to tell you how impressed I am with the work they've been doing. I looked at the site they created as a resource for our community and for our staff. There's videos about how to use online learning. There are all types of resources. And I feel like they have thrown together within a week just amazing resources for our staff. You know, and I say that I'm giving a lot of kudos. I mean, we just have to, first of all, just acknowledge there are going to be glitches and there are going to be needs for adjustment. I mean, but what I feel like we have provided in this time is a framework. I think that's what people are looking for. They're looking for some stability. And do you have a plan? And can you build upon that plan? And I feel very confident in the work that our staff has been doing. We have a framework, and we're going to continue to build on that framework. And I think, you know, as I mentioned in our Sylvan Community Forum this last Tuesday, a week ago, it's hard to believe it was a week ago, you know, we're just asking for patience and understanding. And then, you know, the day following that community forum, we had a lot of emails, a lot of communication from parents, and we have been trying to reach back out to those parents to continue to provide information. Our Ed Services Department has been working with our site principals, trying to work on this week's activities of distribution of materials, sharing schedules, and our Ed Service Director was working with the principals today, in fact, giving further communication and trying to work things out for that distribution. I want to commend the work we're doing for launching our distance learning program. Now, one of the things as far as opening schools, and this is probably one of the more challenging aspects, and this probably has more attention in the media, it has impact on some of the decisions we want to make, and that's childcare. I've received numerous emails and feedback from our community regarding childcare, and we understand the impact that has on our community. I think that's very obvious that families are wondering, how am I going to do this without childcare? We look at our employees. How am I going to effectively teach without childcare? And so our current plan has been to provide opportunities for our teachers to be on site. We feel like that is the most productive place for them to be. We understand there's challenges associated with that. We've created a decision matrix that we are trying to look at the pros and cons of the model we're following, and if we gave other options if childcare was not provided. So there's pros and cons on both sides of that issue. The thing that is making this so challenging is the lack of guidance that we're receiving from the state. We had arranged our free childcare for our employees for school-aged children. We are using and been working with our classified employees to see if they can help provide support in that area. Been feeling very positive about that. What's happened over the last week, there's been mixed messages about whether licensing would approve providing that type of childcare. And we've been receiving all kinds of different advice. We've been waiting for direction from the governor's office. We thought it was going to come on Friday. Then we thought it was going to come yesterday. And then we thought we'd hear something today. And there's been nothing. So we're working with our legal counsel to look at the implications. The challenge with that language is that the language for that type of childcare is very permissive. It's not, this is new. This is not something that schools have had to deal with in the past, providing childcare for their employees at work so that, so they can be there and be able to deliver an online model. So at this point, we're staying the course with that model. We are weighing the options each day. I know there was an article in the paper this afternoon or online that stated that you're not going to be able to get a waiver, that you're done, that the governor doesn't support it. I feel, I don't disagree with that statement because they are not at this point providing waivers. They are waiting for their guidance, but we need to just continue to pursue that course, and we will pivot if necessary. I just want, I want our community to be aware that we're not being wishy-washy on this. We feel the importance of having our teachers at the school site in a safe environment to deliver our Sylvan Select model. But I will keep the board up to date. It changes. I've never seen a situation in my years in education that have been so fluid. You try to make a decision, then you find out you got to wait for more further guidance, and then there's different opinions about that. So, but again, I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that. The other part I wanted to share, and it gets confusing because our community hears these words waivers. And so now I'm talking about a waiver from childcare. Well, then the governor in his provision with his mandates stated that there's a waiver for reopening schools. And there was further guidance that was passed down on Monday from the governor's office regarding that. But I think our community needs to really understand in counties where you are on the state watch list, COVID watch list, you are not permitted to provide in-person instruction. Now, the county public health officer has been very clear. While we're in that state, she would not be granting waivers. She did say if districts want to start pursuing that option, that's your choice to do that. But until there's a change in the spread rate here in our community, that's not going to be an option. So we are ready at any time if we start to see things shift, and hopefully we will with the spread rate, that we will, if necessary, work with our stakeholder groups and pursue a waiver for that. We know how important it is to have our students in person, and especially some of our students with the most vulnerable students. We are committed to that. But at this stage, I just want to make it very clear, we do not have the option or authority to move forward with any kind of in-person learning. We can provide one-on-one assessments for students under real clear guidelines, strict guidelines, but that is the only option we have. But yeah, again, I feel like we're making progress. I think we're communicating well with all of our other local education agencies in our area, and I feel great about what work our staff is doing. Any questions from the board?
No, we're going to go on to the next thing. So a funny thing, and I know we have several community members. There is one factor that is unknown, and we're really not going to know it until school starts, and that is that will our community have the bandwidth to handle this? I don't know how many of you have noticed. I think I have pretty good internet connection at my house and have paid for an upgrade. But in the evenings, in fact, I just got a notice that my internet connection at times becomes unstable. So if you lose me tonight, It's not because I didn't pay my cable bill. It's just that in the evenings, we've been noticing over the past week or two that I don't know, everybody's streaming Netflix, I think, in the evenings or something when they get off of work. We'll see how that works out.
Well, and can I just respond?
Yeah.
We're talking about challenges that we're dealing with to our plans, best made plans.
Yeah.
You know, there is some discussion in the county. Do we have enough bandwidth to provide all the streaming for this online learning? You know, that is, and we're going to be doing a test countywide on the 6th, I believe. Yeah, we're on the 6th. And so we're going to give it a try. But yeah, I mean, this is where you ask for patience with your community. It's like, we're going to do the best we can, but we may end up with some connectivity issues. Depends.
It could happen. I think we're starting to experience it at unique times throughout the day. But
Yeah.
Let's go on to item 9B, which is our state adopted budget impact, which is our 45-day revise. Mrs. Aguilar, do you have any good news for us today?
Oh,
Good evening. Can you hear me?
If you could turn your
Yeah.
volume up
Yes.
a little bit, please.
Sure. Okay, let me know if that's better.
Much better.
Yay. Okay. So good evening. Yes, I actually do have some good news. I was telling Mr. Frederickson earlier, I was pretty excited that I, get to deliver some good news today. So that's not always typical of us delivering the financial news all the time. So I'm happy about that. So before you, I have the presentation for the 45-day budget update, commonly known as the 45-day revise. And what this is that after the state adopts the budget, which is usually after we do, just because of the timing of the way it works out, then if there are significant impacts as a result of the enacted budget, then we bring that information to the board, informing them of what those changes are. And as you will all well recall, we have had significant things that were unknown and continue to be unknown, but particularly as we work through the process of working towards an adopted budget. And so the most significant, I'll go into the next slide here, the most significant by and far of the changes is the change to the local control funding formula, or LCFF COLA, our cost of living increase. As you know, this portion of our total revenues is the largest part of the district's revenues, the most significant, that supports the vast majority of the general operations of the district. And so if you look here at the yellow boxes here that I'm focused on, which is the 2021 year and the 2 years subsequent to that, at May revise, when the governor released his proposal, the COLA was at minus 7.92%, and that is what statutorily we had to base our adopted budget on. The actual state enacted budget reduced that down to a 0%, so essentially flat funding from 1920 going into 2021. So that is, almost 8% negative that we were counting on. Obviously, significant change to our budget, and you can see here in the amounts listed here in the yellow boxes, 5.7 million, pretty much for each of the 3 years, 2021, 21-22, and 22-23. Those would be increased revenues to each of those years as a result of going to 0%. So what I'm going to show you on the next page is then what the impact is of this change to our bottom line. And I have a couple other changes that I want to point out as well, this by far being the most significant. Another change, we had anticipated some change to the STRS and PERS retirement rate that would get applied, and so those were actually came out better than we had projected in our favor. So that is a savings also that we'll be showing on the multi-year projections that we'll be presenting to you, a total of 1.2 million less expenses in the 2021 year than initially identified in the adopted budget. The next slide is relatively small in comparison to the other ones, change of $68,000 to overall state revenues for lottery and block grant. So what does this do for our overall multi-year projection as we look at the impact? So we have a couple of scenarios, and as I go through, it'll make sense as why we're presenting two different scenarios. The first one shows that 5.7 million, and I don't see them lined out. I'm just trying to give you a bottom line impact here. So what I want to point out is, if you recall an adopted budget, we had projected that we would need significant reductions in our two future years in 21-22 and 22-23. You see where the red arrow is, the $5.4 million reductions, and in the 22-23 year, the $8.7 million reductions. These were reductions that we had to make in order to even just meet our state mandated minimum reserve of 3%. Now with these added revenues and reduced expenses, as we look at our bottom line here in blue, our total reserves, which in these out years, we're looking just right at 3%. Now we're looking at having the 3% reserve plus on top of that 15.75 for a total of 18.75 in 21-22, for example. And in 22-23, we'd be just under 24%, and then overall 26.5%. The ending position for the current year, 2020-2021, is also improved, bringing us up to 9.9% and 12.9% overall. So when you look at this, the other thing I want to point out here is, if you look at this right here in the middle, net increase, decrease in fund balance, you look specifically at the two out years where we have those very large reductions, that we would be, if we in fact made $5.4 million of reductions in 21-22, what this says is then we would have a net increase to our fund balance. So we would have per se more money than we would be bringing in, that when we spent out, that we would be adding into our reserves or our savings to the tune of $3.8 million in 21-22 and $5.9 million in 22-23. Now those are large amounts because there are significant reductions that we are assuming here. So because of that, and because this reserve down here is significantly above the board's target, then we're presenting an additional scenario in light of these increased revenues. Okay, so scenario two. What scenario two does is then it takes those $2 amounts there and it decreases those down to 1.7 million in 21-22 and 2.9 million in 22-23. And what does that do to the bottom line? If you look at the green arrows here, the net increase or decrease that we were looking at before, where we were in the millions, pretty much brings us to a break-even point, if you will. So we're not doing any deficit spending, and we're not necessarily adding to our reserve or our savings. And what does this do for the bottom line? If you look at the bottom line, the blue arrow of our reserves here across the 3 years, we're looking at all years hovering right around, right under, right above a 10% reserve for unassigned, and 13% when you add in the 3% minimum reserve. So that is the upper end of the goal, the board's 9 to 10% reserve target for the unassigned balance. So this scenario is just an indication to show, I think, really where we were at adopted budget, and now with these added revenues, where when we look at 21-22, We are not necessarily in a place where we have to look at making $5.4 million of reductions, potentially somewhere more in the neighborhood of 1.7, 2 million, somewhere in there, if that's the board direction, to bring us to a point where we're pretty much breaking even and maintaining a target of 10% reserve for unassigned balances. I know that's a lot of information, so I'm going to kind of
Excellent.
pause and ask for any questions here.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Lindsay has her hand up. Go ahead, Mrs. Lindsay. Your mute is on, Mrs. Lindsay.
Sorry. I said maybe I got lost in this explanation, but with the 5 to 6 month deferrals, I mean, I know we're going to have to borrow. I know we're going to have to borrow from not only ourselves, but from other places. Where does that fall into this? I mean, I don't see us being in this good a shape after we have to pay all that back.
That's a great question, Mrs. Lindsay. So I will speak to the cash deferrals in some of the subsequent action items. But what I will tell you is that when we look at these projections, we're looking at our budget numbers. And when we look at the cash deferrals, we are looking at the actual inflow and outflow of cash money in the bank, not what's on budget. And so as I speak to those items, which I believe are items 10E, 10F, and G, I will speak to cash flow and the impact of those deferrals and how we plan to mitigate the effects of those deferrals.
I appreciate that, Ms. Lizette, but when I do my budget, I add those into my budget. And so I think it's important that we see those in this budget line. You can't pull out money and say that's in a different pot. I know you work at it that way because it's inflow and outflow, but we need to see it in the budget, how we're going to take care of that. At least I do. And when I'm doing my own business budgets and when I do my home budgets, I like to see where that money's going to come from and where it's going to come out of.
Absolutely. So the money that you're speaking to is in here in budget in the revenues. We will be getting IOUs or deferrals from the state in terms of the cash that comes into our bank account. And so how we will be dealing with that is we will be borrowing from our other funds that we have in the district that are restricted funds, but during times like this, we are allowed to borrow from those funds, and you have a resolution to approve that. And the other option, once we utilize those funds, is to borrow from our county treasury, which will allow us to go into a negative cash balance, and we'll just apply negative interest into our account. And that will be the extent of the cost of that. And between those two, we have sufficient borrowing capability. We actually have excess borrowing capability to be able to cover our expenses in the current 2021 year.
I understand that, Lizette. You're
So
missing
that while it's
question.
not lined out in here. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
I said, you're missing my question. My question is, I understand where the money's coming from. I understand how we're going to pay it. What I don't understand is we're depending on the state to bring us this money, and we're seeing how quickly the state's doing all the things they say they're going to do, which is like at a snail's pace. So there's no really guarantee that we'll even get that money. So we need to be able to know what is a backup option. What are we going to do if we don't get that money back into our coffers? And I mean, it's kind of scary to just base everything on the idea that the state's going to come through with money that we haven't really know that it's going to come through.
So yes, in those borrowing scenarios that I described, we are making the assumption that the state is not going to give us that cash in the current year.
Right.
So we're not counting on that cash in the current year. We're counting on that revenue. Statutorily, we can count on that revenue in our budget, but we're not counting on receiving the cash.
Okay, further questions? All right, let's move on then to the COVID money.
I am so sorry, Mr. Raw. I did have a question. I just didn't get to my mute button in time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mrs. Harvey.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So we were going to have to, if you go up, we were going to have to cut where we were short 5-point-something million. And now, because the state is giving out more money because they realize they have more money, you're now only going to have to cut 1.7. Is that my understanding correct?
That is
That's
your
one
understanding,
option.
correct? And
Okay.
that is one option, and that is assuming that we continue to have flat funding as we assumed in this current year. Now, clearly that situation can change because we have to wait until the governor comes out with his January proposals to really know what next year will bring. But
Got it.
based on the information we have now, those are the assumptions that we're using.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Very
So,
good.
and Mr. Wright, I'd like to interject there as well. I just given the situation, I apologize, but I can't imagine there's going to be flat funding next year or even a year after, just given the circumstances of this year, kind of how, you know, with the economy, the state that it is. So thrilled that the immediate picture is better than maybe anticipated, but I think that next year is going to be as bad as probably we should expect it to be. And a great idea to start planning for that process at this time. But thank you for the updated numbers. I appreciate that very much.
So,
Absolutely, Mr.
So
Collins.
fellow board members, before we go on to COVID funding, Mr. Frederickson and I will be laying out some budget sessions starting here within about a month or so, where we begin to work on that first anywhere from 1.7 to 5.4 million. Again, that's a moving target. We do know that at a minimum it needs to be 1.7, but could be as much as more than that. But we will be setting up meetings prior to regular board meetings where we can start talking about what we do so that we are well prepared for our budget adoption next June 30th. All right, so let's talk about the new COVID funds that are coming in to help us navigate this difficult time and what the government is telling us that we may be getting to deal with COVID. So Mrs. Aguilar, if you want to talk about COVID money now.
Yes. It's not too often in one board meeting that I get to speak about $5 million additional dollars 2 times in a row. So pretty different. But so COVID funding is special funding that we have been allocated. It has been confirmed by the California Department of Education. I presented at the special board meeting that we had last week. I presented some preliminary information to the board. And so this is an update to that information. And the CDE has now confirmed and given us actual amounts for the COVID funds. So I'll preface with that. But you can see kind of by my color coding that there are 3 pots of money. The first one being $137,000 that we received last year to deal with many of these emergency needs. And the vast majority of that has been spent on various PPE, sanitation, disinfecting, and instructional materials, packets of that nature that were sent home. The next 2 colors, which is the first one is the ester here in the purplish, 1.2 million these are new funds that we're just receiving confirmation and amounts on. And these are funds that we can spend for this particular pot of money, the 1.2 million, up until September of 2022. And these are all to be directed towards things that are in support of the COVID response. This next big green block of funds is by far the most significant, and this is the 5 million that I was alluding to. I'm actually going to kind of scroll down here and show you the summary on the bottom, because this sums it up very nicely. I know this is a whole lot of information, but all of the green here is 5,549,000, and that is referred to as learning loss mitigation. These funds are going to be put into what's called a local continuity and attendance plan that will be brought before the board by September 30th, and that show the plan and the intent of the district of how to utilize these funds. And the other important factor is that of this 5.5 million, if we look up here on the spending timeline, and let me just see if I can, I was trying to make this bigger, but I don't see the option. Up here on the spending timeline, $5,020,548 must be spent by December 30th of this 2020 year. Again, all of those in line with what will be presented to the board in the learning continuity and attendance plan. So when you look at that green 5.5 million, the 1.2 million, and the 137,000, these represent the total COVID one-time funds. And I stress the one-time because these are funds that are only being given to us once. They're not ongoing revenues that we can count on receiving every year. They're one-time, and so they should be directed towards expenses that are one-time in nature as well, because you don't want to use one-time money to support ongoing operations. Or if you should definitely account for any of that if that is the approach you're taking and with a reason why you would be doing that. But these are one-time funds totaling 6.9 million. And like I said, the most significant update is we have received confirmation on these from the CDE. They're posted on their website now with our specified amounts, and they are all preliminary. That's just the nature of how CDE puts out funding amounts. So they can, change slightly, but usually they don't change significantly. So that is the update I have for now. Like I said, you will continue to hear more about this. You will probably continue to see expenses that will be brought before the board to support all of these COVID learning loss mitigation response efforts, as well as the learning continuity and attendance plan. Any questions on this?
Yeah, Lizette. So we'll get to board questions in just a moment. Just letting my fellow board members know that this will be a regular item that you're going to see under information and discussion. And attached to this, we pretty much know the money now that's coming in. This will always be available. And then we will have a running list of how we're expending that. Because this is separate from our regular budget, these are considered COVID funds. We'll have a document that you'll be able to see regularly updated about how the money came in and how it's going to be expended. So further questions by board members?
Mr. Raw?
Mrs. Lindsay.
Yes, Lizette, I believe at our last meeting, I asked you if this would be retroactive back to March when we went out. Were you able to find out anything about that, whether we can recoup some of the monies we spent from March till now?
This does go back to March 1st, and we can go back and look and identify, and we are actually beginning work on that and identifying any expenses that were related that we could use these funds to offset that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other board member questions? All right. Thank you for that.
Mrs. Miyakawa looks.
Okay. So
I
Lizette,
raised my hand, George.
you
I
are,
raised
here's
my
the,
hand.
so I will tell you, and I apologize, thank you. I can now see all the members. When we flash the screen and put an attachment on the screen, there are currently 16 people on my screen, and it will only show me about 6 at a time. And so you were off the screen, and that's why I didn't see you.
Oh.
Alice.
Oh.
But now that the attachment is gone, I can see all your beautiful faces. So Mrs. Miyakawa.
Yeah, mine was just kind of a part two of Mrs. Lindsay's question. She addressed the March part. Did we get an answer on if these monies, we know they have to be expended in December, but remember we had brought up the fact that, can they go for things that, go the full school year? Did we get an answer on that?
The full school year.
Remember when we said there were
going
some of these,
back.
what's that?
When you
Sorry.
say the full school year, you mean the 2021 year, or do you mean the 1920
Right.
year?
So we spend the money on a contract that takes us into all the way through the end of school year in May 2021, and we weren't sure you were going to look into the fact that we were still good spending that money on contractual things that bleed over into the second half of this school year, but wouldn't necessarily be done in
Right.
as of December.
Okay,
Do we-
I remember your question. We're still awaiting further clarification. They put out some frequently asked questions and clarification, but not sufficient to be able to answer that question as of right now. So as of right now, my answer would be no. We would need to use the $5 million that expires in December. We would need to use only for services through December. So anything in January and beyond would be, the other funds that we have for the other couple of years. But that could change depending on the guidance that they put out. So I will keep on monitoring that guidance so we can have more clarification on that.
Right, because that's a little problematic, right? With a few of the items that you presented to us at our special board meeting, they bleed over, their hot spots or, whatever that, continue throughout the year. So
What we would do is we would allocate the portion that applies through December to the funds that expire at that point. Anything that goes beyond to January would be the other funds that expire. We have an additional 2 years to spend that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Lindsay, you had another question.
You're muted, Mrs.
You're
Lindsay.
still muted, Mrs. Lindsay.
Sorry.
You're still muted.
Am I unmuted now?
You're good now.
Okay. Lizette, the equipment that we bought, the big cleaners and things like that, would those things be involved in that COVID money? I mean, even though they're going to be staying with us,
Yes,
would they
we
be
can
covered?
Yes, we actually, that first pot of money, the 137,000, we utilized that for those cleaners, those Clorox foggers that you're referring to, I believe.
So they'll go into 2021, 22, and hopefully longer. So is that a different thought?
Right. When you buy goods, that you can charge them the year that you buy them. So those were all already accounted for in that 137,000.
So it would have to be some kind of a contract that was not something that would be an item, in other words, that Mrs. Miyakawa was alluding to.
Correct. When it's services, then depending on what the rule says, you may have to allocate it over the period of time.
So like when Mr. Collins suggested last meeting that we stock up on COVID supplies, that would be something that would be usable, right? But it's being bought at this time. Okay, fantastic. That's good news.
If it's as long as you receive the goods.
All right. Well, we're still getting further clarification. It's a little dicey because, it's like a Chromebook. We're buying a Chromebook. Well, why we bought them is because every kid needed a Chromebook. We wouldn't normally buy them at this time because we didn't have the funding for them. But you wouldn't just prorate a Chromebook over a 4-month period of time. You know, same way with the hotspots. I mean, companies aren't going to sell us 4 months, but we need them. And so we have to, so I think we have some good arguments to get the full amount expensed out, just because the particular vendor would not sell us that item or that service in a shorter contract. So I think, you know, I've been in this rodeo before where we did things like this, and what the rule that always ended up boiled down to was if we paid the full price within the window of time, they allowed us to expense it out. For example, if we paid for the full Chromebook before December, we got to take that expense. If we paid for the full hotspot or the full subscription to an online service and we paid for it prior, they let us expense the whole amount, even though it eked over a few months into the following year. I don't know if they're going to allow that, but that's administering government contracts. But we'll see. Lizette will keep us in safe harbor. So
Yes.
we'll be in good. Let's go ahead and move on to our board meeting schedule for the coming year. Mr. Frederickson, did you want to lay out any unique things in that for us?
Well, I mean, it's so funny. What isn't being impacted by COVID? You know, you even look into your calendar that you're trying to establish for next year. And again, this is our first look at a draft for next year's calendar. But looking here, the board usually schedules a board retreat after the CSBA conference. But is that even going to happen? And do we need a board retreat if that's not going to happen? So again, I started looking at some of the items on here that were traditional calendar events. And do we want to think of some other ideas or wait till we get closer to see how much impact that's going to have on our calendar?
Well, the reason the one was in January is actually that's our goal setting board retreat. I think we'll probably need to hold it by Zoom, and it works with the goals of the board and the superintendent. So we'll probably still have it. We'll probably just have to do it under a Zoom format. As you are correct in saying that we as a board decided not to do any travel this year, so no CSBA conference. But we're probably going to need to add a few budget sessions before board meetings and do some other things like that. So what I recommend is over the coming week, fellow board members, look at that calendar. If there's something you want to add to it, please email myself or Mr. Frederickson or Mrs. Silva, and let us know that you want to have something added to the calendar. So before we bring it back and vote on it, that everyone's thoughts and ideas have been implemented in that. All right, perfect. Let's talk about safety, Mr. Frederickson.
I believe that's Lizette.
Oh, Lizette, did you want to talk about safety?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Mr. Frederickson? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yes, so I can update you on the UStack modernization. Not a whole lot of change from my last Friday update. We checked in this morning and had our usual weekly meeting, and schedule continues as updated on Friday, which is the vast majority of all of the work will be complete by the end of this month. And with only the speed line at the kitchen remaining with some additional work, 1 maximum 2 weeks into September. That was due to some COVID supply shortage, COVID-related supply shortage for the blocks that they had to use for that speed line. But other than that, everything continues on track and is well on its way to actually nearing the end of the project. That's all I have.
I'll be with you in a moment, Mrs. Lindsay. Lizette, a couple of things. A board member threw out a great idea, and I apologize for not giving credit because I don't remember which one did it. But I know that Somerset, you sent us a memo that all the cameras were installed. I think it would be a very important thing to put up around the campus on the exterior fences, that the campus is under 24-hour surveillance at all times. I think that is a great deterrent, and it's actually true. But I would also like to know if the system is working and is accessible. If somebody have we received any notifications? Have we used the system? And are we looking at footage? And is it working the way we wanted it? This was supposed to be our pioneer system, meaning we're going to test it and run it and see if it works. So at some period of time, could you bring as a board report to us that that it's working, if it's working, and what you've done to test the system, and you've used it for maybe a month and it's working? But I love the idea, and I don't know, you can raise your hand if you had the idea, but I thought it was outstanding that we put these signs on fences, professional ones printed, that the campus is under 24-hour surveillance. I think that'll stop a lot of vandalism, and it actually may have some kids thinking twice before they act in the halls outside, that, before they, cuff the kid next to them. They could be under surveillance, But anyway, thank you whoever had that idea. I thought it was excellent. Mrs. Lindsay, you had a question under safety.
I have a great story to share about that, if I could.
Okay, go ahead, Lizette.
We actually have seen a sign of a situation where this was a deterrent. When the camera was noticed, there was some kids that were walking through, and the camera caught them, and we saw the video of, not sure what quite they were up to, and then they saw the camera and looked up at the camera, looked straight into the camera, and realized, oh, we're on video. And they proceeded to acknowledge the camera, and then they left. So already seeing good signs that these are deterrents, but definitely signs were a great idea, and we'll be looking into that.
Well, great. Well, maybe the signs on the fence will keep them from jumping the fence onto the property, and they'll actually know it before they go on. So great, good news. Mrs. Lindsay, did you have a question regarding safety?
I had a question for USTAC, the USTAC modernization. And this, don't throw stones at me, but it's just an idea. Since we've been pursuing a lot of the technology, Chromebooks and things like that, and it looks like it's going to be a wave of the future. I know I've asked the question of Laura to check in to see about the state giving us credit for technology as opposed to buying textbooks. My question is, did we think about or talk about maybe not turning the USAC library back into a full library, but possibly adding computers in there, making it more of a technology center as opposed to a library per se. And I'm not, please don't jump on that. I don't believe in libraries. I just see that the future of our children is going to be on things like Kindle and iPads and Chromebooks. And I just was wondering if there's any thought was taken in that area of turning that into more of a technology center.
I'm not aware of any discussions. I don't know if Mrs. Granger's aware of any discussions around that.
Is that, I'm just throwing that out. If both the board members think I'm crazy, that's okay. Tell me. I just wondered if it's something that we're in the process of redoing that library, and I don't know.
Amy, I would ask, does USAC already have a technology center somewhere on campus?
They used to many years ago. I don't know if they still do.
Let's have Mrs. Granger give you an update. I think she's got can provide some clarity.
So you're muted still, Mrs. Granger. I'm sorry.
You're muted.
Thank you so much. So in regards to having standalone labs in our schools, you know, that is a practice that has been replaced in the most recent years with our one-to-one initiative. With every kid having a device that's on their person and moving about the school, the feasibility and the utility of labs for the purposes of having them as a standalone location for specific things has been replaced with the one-to-one initiative.
So no computer labs at all. Is that what you're saying?
The whole school is a computer lab.
Computer.
Every kid is using that Chromebook, especially at the middle school where you're talking specifically about UStack. But every child is moving from class to class about the campus, in and out of the library, on their breaks and lunches, in and out of electives, with a Chromebook with them all the time.
But tell me, what do they use the library for? If they've got everything on the Chromebook, why do they need the library? And I'm not putting down libraries. I really would like to know the purpose of libraries now.
So there's still a great deal of work that goes into the library, the librarian working with students on research projects, using resources, proper citation of resources. Classrooms schedule visits in the library. In middle school in particular, history social studies will go in there with a particular project or a period in history to do research. And of course, there is still the opportunity for kids to check out books. Not every book is available in a digital platform or in a digital bookshelf. So we still want to encourage the love of reading, wide reading, deep reading, and the libraries provide that opportunity for students as well.
So the Chromebooks don't cover all that, in other words.
Correct, right. The Chromebooks serve a purpose certainly related to curriculum and applications and extensions of learning and digital platforms, but the library still has a unique purpose and really still serves as the heart of our school to build literacy and a love of learning and the opportunity to learn a lot of different things and access a lot of different materials. So yes, they still have a role.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer.
And you know, when you're in a physical library, if you're looking for something on a device, you're going to find what you sought to find. But when you're in a physical library, you are literally surrounded by ideas and creativity, and you are open to a whole new world of things that you wouldn't normally do.
I love the conversation. If a board member would like to request us to agendize an item to check out the feasibility of libraries, happy to add that to a future agenda, but that doesn't fall under safety. So
no, she was talking about
I understand, Ms. Lindsay, but I'm going to move forward. Thank
Georgia,
you.
one follow-up question.
Yes, Ms. Miyakawa.
With regards to the cameras, could you clarify for me, don't we have a few video cameras, like just referring to our middle schools in general? I know Somerset is our complete, souped up version, but don't we have a few cameras at, oh my goodness gracious, not UStack, not Somerset, Savage. Yeah. Do we have a few at Savage? And because I bring that up because I know UStack, they're trying to come up with some skateboard deterrents. I don't know if that, if we have the capability of throwing a camera or two up there. It's not something, it just occurred to me as we were talking about deterrence.
Do you have an answer?
Not that I know of, but I can double check and find out and provide the board an update on that.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So if you, Mrs. Aguilar, if you could put in a Friday update, the question is, what other school sites have cameras on them? Is I think basically what we're looking for. We're on to item 10A, adopting resolution 2020-2021, number 1, designation of authorized agents of the Sylvan Union School District for the year 2020. Eric, you can talk about this, but basically we're adding you to the signature list is what we're doing here. So I'm looking for a board member to make the motion. You can raise your hand.
So moved.
Moved by Miyakawa in a second. By
Mrs. Lindsay is raising her hand.
Please vote.
Board Member Combs,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Ross,
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries and the resolution is adopted. Just a mindset, everyone, you have your phone in front of you. Put an alarm on it to come into the district office tomorrow morning and sign the document on Mrs. Silva's desk. Item 10B is the adopted resolution of 2021, number 2, the reopening plan for the 2020-21 school year. Mr. Frederickson.
Yeah, again, this is not a requirement. We just felt it would be prudent to have a resolution regarding the clear direction that the governor provided regarding the reopening of schools. And I think I talked a bit about that when we were talking about the waiver during my report. But again, his directive on the 17th of July was if you were in a county that was on the watch list, you were not permitted to have in-person learning, that you must provide a distance learning program with strict guidelines. And once you are off to be eligible, once you are off the list for 14 days, then the public health officer could approve you to reopen with a waiver. So this is, again, just a commitment by our district that we are following his mandates and that we are going to implement 100% distance learning education.
Very good. We have a motion by a board member. You can do it by a raise of hand. I can see all of you. We have Mrs. Harvey making the motion and the second by Mrs. Lindsay. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay, Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Ross.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries. The resolution is adopted. Item 10C is the approval of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Sylvan Union School District and the Sylvan Educators Association regarding COVID-19, the response and fall 2020 reopening plan with learners. Dee Dee?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So Sylvan Educators Association and the district have met in spring as well as all during the summer. And we will continue to have consistent communication and continue to look for solutions in our shared response to COVID and school closure and school reopening. So presented for the board's approval is the MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, between Sylvan Union School District and Sylvan Educators Association regarding the district's response to COVID-19 pandemic and the reopening of schools for the 2020-21 school year. After collaboration between both parties, the MOU was drafted and approved to address the unprecedented challenges, I think we've heard that word a couple times tonight, and required expectations for the district and staff faced with school reopening, the utilization of distance learning, the Sylvan Select model, and the health and safety of staff in response to COVID-19. Staff recommends the approval of the MOU between both parties.
Thank you, Dee Dee. For our public out there, item 10C is a negotiated item and falls under negotiations. As a result, the item was fully discussed in closed session as appropriated by law. At this time, though, the document has been made public for the public to see and understand, and I'm looking for a motion by a board member to accept the Memorandum of Understanding with the Sylvan Educators Association. I have a motion by Mrs. Harvey and a second by Mrs. Miyakawa. Is there a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye. Thank you very much.
Board President Ross.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries and the Memorandum of Understanding is been adopted. Item 10D is the approval of the Loss Control Services Agreement with Keenan and Associations. Keenan and Associates, Mrs. Aguilar.
Yes, these are required inspections to inspect our site and identify any loss control or risk management concerns. The agreement would be with Keenan, would come out and assess all of our sites, provide us a report of that and provide follow-up audit to see how those any of those concerns are addressed. And so the agreement is brought before you for recommendation for approval. Are there any questions?
Yeah, questions by fellow board members? Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve. A motion by Mrs. Lindsay and a second. Second by Mr. Collins. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Ross.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries and the item is approved. We're moving to item 10E, which is the approve the cash flow bridge loan request to the county treasurer. Mrs. Aguilar, you've already referred to this earlier under the deferral section, but if you needed any further clarification, you're welcome to do that at this time.
I would just like to share that these three items, yes, Mr. Ross, you said, I alluded to them before. Items 10E, 10F, and 10G are all part of the district's plan and how we would respond and deal with the cash deferrals that were part of the state adopted budget. And so what I'm just going to do a really quick share and there we go. A little bit of what I talked about, I want to make sure I address and clear about the cash deferrals. You will recall this money bags chart that I shared before that show in the 2021 year, which is everything here from February through June, all this cash would not be received in the 2021 year. The cash would be received in what is actually the 21-22 fiscal year. You see June got received in July, May, and August, and so on and so forth. And so these cash deferrals are like IOUs. The state has made a commitment to pay them to us, but we will actually not receive the cash in the bank until months later. And because of these amounts, and they're quite large and consecutive, and it severely impacts our ability to pay our bills, to pay our invoices, to make our payroll, and so may require borrowing from our other funds, our county treasurer, or even possibly outside sources. The next page here shows the actual projected impact of these cash deferrals of 2021 and what specifically they mean to us. So the total that we would potentially be deferred for February through June of 2021 is $21.8 million. Our projected cash deficit, based on the assumption that we don't receive this 21.8, is $16 million. The difference between this is because we don't necessarily spend every dollar that we receive. So based on what we project to spend in our cash flow, we would need $16 million in order to pay our bills and make our payroll. And so the next line here shows, so how do we deal with this $16 million shortfall? We have interfund district borrowing projected at $6.4 million, and that is borrowing essentially from ourselves, like I said, other restricted funds. And the item 10G actually establishes this resolution in which the board grants authority to be able to do that and borrow from our other restricted funds as allowed to us by regulation. So that would leave a remaining deficit of $9.6 million of cash that we would still need. And so how do we make up that shortfall? Then we borrow from the county treasury, which we have as of now up to $12.6 million available to us to borrow to be able to meet these needs. And that would even potentially leave us with excess borrowing available of just slightly over $3 million. So we would have sufficient between these two sources that we have, our interfund district borrowing and county treasury borrowing, to be able to meet our obligations, pay our bills, make our payroll for the 2021 year, and we would not have the need to go out and do any external borrowing. You've heard of trans, which are external borrowing, and that would be kind of the next, one of the potential next sources that we would go to in the event that we didn't have sufficient cash in these two. But fortunately we do. So this specific 10E is to approve the request to the county treasury, which is this request that you have here. And it specifies how they exactly calculate the $12.6 million that we could borrow from the county treasury. And then there is item 10F has the resolution that lays this out and authorizes this borrowing from the county. And then item 10G is the resolution to have interfund borrowing from ourselves, from our special restricted funds that we're able to borrow from. So those are the three items, and I will take any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, I'll be with you in a moment, Ms. Lindsay. All right, thank you. You made that very clear. So just for our general public out there, deferrals are not revenues and expenditures that you find in your budget. This is strictly cash flow issues. How much money do we have in the bank to operate on a day-to-day basis? And as we call upon the government to give us our money along the way, they just say that we're going to give you an IOU and pay you a few months later. They promised us that they're going to give it to us. It's just going to be later. Fortunately, with your analysis, Mrs. Aguilar, we have found that between all of our funds and the county funds, that there are plenty of funds that we don't need to go to a third party outside of either ourselves or the county to operate cash flow for the coming budget year. So that's excellent news that you have given us. But I know at times out there, the term deferrals can be complicated. The Sylvan District has lived through deferrals once in the past, back in many years ago. And we went to the county and we borrowed money just like we did to meet our payroll and so forth. It doesn't affect the budget. It affects our cash flow. So thank you for that. Also, if I'm sure, and I don't want to cause your phone to ring off the hook, Mrs. Aguilar, but if people have questions about how deferrals work and how they affect the finances of a particular district, I recommend that you reach out to Mrs. Aguilar in the district office, and she would be happy to answer how deferrals work. But this is great news, Mrs. Aguilar. We can deal with our cash flow issues between us and the county, and that's good news. So I see board members' hands. Mrs. Lindsay, you're welcome to put forth your question at this time.
Yes, Mrs. Aguilar. I'm understanding, and I want to be sure that I understand this clearly. The $12 million that's in the county coffers, is that our money that we put there, or is that the county's money?
It's money that's sitting in the county pool, but if you, we've looked at the calculation of how they arrive at that. It's based on our property taxes, and that kind of serves as a security, if you will, for that borrowing. So while it is based on our money, that money may have not been received by the county treasury quite yet. And so they may be advancing that from other funds, from other organizations, other school districts that they hold funds for.
Okay, so that would leave like $3,000. Was it 3,000 or 3 million?
3 million.
3 million.
3 million in that pot. Is that pot to have to be replaced? Does that 12 million have to be replaced, or will it slowly be replaced over the next coming years? I'm looking that I guess my thought is, supposing this happens again the next year, which would be 21, 22, what would we do?
Mrs. Lindsay, look at it like it's a line of credit.
Right.
The 12 million is a line of credit. They've determined that line of credit based upon security of property taxes should we ever default on paying it back, and that it would be secured, which is silly to think. And the whole principle of deferrals from the government is a silly prospect, and it's our state legislatures playing a shell game with money up in Sacramento. Don't get me started on this. But look at that 12 million as a line of credit that should we need it for cash flow purposes, we're allowed to go to the county, borrow on that line of credit. We have to pay it back.
Okay, that was my question. Okay.
Yes, we have to
Okay.
pay it back.
So that does have an effect on our budget then, because we will have to come up with where we're going to pay it back.
Well, Mrs. Lindsay, it only affects our budget if we ever have to make an interest payment on it over and above, that we would have to add to our expense line on our budget. But it doesn't affect revenue and expenses. It's just the timing of when the money comes in and the money goes out. And we don't ever want to be caught with our pants down where we owe people money and we don't have any money in our bank account. So we have a line of credit with the county.
Right. I understand that.
To borrow from. The same way with our other funds. She's asking, one of the resolutions she's asking for is that we can use our cafeteria fund, we can use our facility funds, we can go into those funds and borrow from them, but we are required to pay those funds back because they're restricted funds. But we can use the cash temporarily to get us through a tight time. But we will have to pay all of them back, but that's in the budget to pay it back, other than the interest expense, which we don't really know what it's going to be, right, Mrs. Aguilar? We don't know if there is an interest expense, and if there is, it hasn't been budgeted, but it shouldn't be too bad of a number.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm just asking Lizette, if this should happen again in 21-22, and we only have 3 million, where would we go to the county? Would we go to private borrowing, a bank or something like that? Would we go some out of the county?
We would likely have replenished that line of credit, as Mr. Rawl calls it, because we will have paid back the 9 million. And so depending on the timing of things, if we have paid that all back, then for the 21-22 year, we would have potentially another 12 million available to borrow from again if we needed to.
So they're going to pay us not only that from that February to June, but then they're also going to pay us back that plus June to December's money, right? So we're getting double paid.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
That's what they should be doing. Now, we won't know all the specifics of what's going to happen in 21-22 until we start talking budget for 21-22.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, I was very worried. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mrs. Lindsay, the governor and the Senate and the legislators in Sacramento have promised us that they'll pay the money to us. We're going to go on that. The alternative is the collapse of the California economy, where every school district goes bankrupt and the whole economy collapses. Is that possible? Maybe, but I'm not going to worry about that today, because they promised us that they're going to borrow enough money or get enough money in tax revenues to pay all the districts what they promised to pay. And that's what we built our budget off of, that money is going to actually come in.
I feel better. Thank you.
Good. All right. So we're going to vote on 3 successive things in a row, all relating to this particular item. Our first one is item 10E, which is the approval of the cash flow bridge loan request to the county treasurer. I'm looking for
Motion to approve.
a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Ms. Lindsay. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Ross.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion carries. Item 10E has been adopted. Item 10F is the adoption of a resolution 2021 number 03, which is the tax anticipation note for borrowing from the county treasurer. I'm looking for a motion to approve this resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Mrs. Harvey. A roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Roth.
Aye. That's a 5-0 vote. The resolution carries and is adopted. Item 10G is adopting resolution 2021 number 04 to establish temporary interfund transfers of special or restricted fund monies for cash flow purposes. For my fellow board members, this is where we look at all of our funds that we are going to be borrowing from and paying back. So we're allowed to do that. We need a special resolution to do that. It just can't be done by staff. So I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mrs. Harvey and a second by Mrs. Miyakawa. A roll call vote on this resolution.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Roth.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote. The motion is adopted and the resolution will carry forward. We'll move with item 10H, which is the approval of the Memorandum of Understanding with Modesto City Schools for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program. Is Dawn here? Or who's hand? Yeah, I see Dawn's name down there. You want to let us look at your picture, Dawn? And did you
Mr.
want to
Raw,
say?
I believe Mrs. Granger is ready to handle this one.
Oh, Mrs. Gray, is Dawn at home or is she not home right now? Go ahead, Mrs. Granger.
All right, it's my pleasure to represent special education this evening. So yes, we bring forward a MOU between Modesto City Schools for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, be able to provide for those services through Modesto City Schools, in an MOU between Modesto City Schools and Sylvan Union School District for the period of the coming school year. And this is the second year that we have brought forward this contract for services that were previously provided for these school-age children through SELPA, but are now being provided through Modesto City Schools.
Questions by any board members? Looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
A motion by Mr. Collins, a second by Mrs. Lindsay. A roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Roth.
Aye, the motion carries. The memorandum of understanding is adopted. Item 10I is approval of construction expenditure funds. Seeing no questions or hands, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Mr. Raw, correction.
Oh, go ahead, Mrs. Lindsay.
Was that a 10I or 11I?
10I, which is approval of construction funds.
Oh, I jumped too far.
A motion by Mr. Collins and a second. Second by Mrs. Harvey. Roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Roth.
Aye. The item 10I is, with the 5-0 vote, is approved for the expenditure of construction funds. Starting with Mrs. Harvey, on consent items, are there any items you either want to remove for a second vote or have questions on? Seeing none. Mrs. Miyakawa, are there any items either to be removed or questions on? None. Seeing none. Mr. Collins,
Not at
any
this time.
questions? None?
No,
None.
not at this time.
Lindsay, are there any items for a separate vote or questions on either items? Mrs. Lindsay?
No.
All right. And there are none from me, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as laid out.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Mr. Collins made the motion, and a second on the consent agenda. A second by Mrs. Harvey. A roll call vote, please.
Board Member Collins,
Aye.
Board Member Harvey,
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay,
Aye.
Board Member Miyakawa,
Aye.
Board President Ross.
Aye, that's a 5-0 vote on the consent agenda. The items are adopted and approved. Item 12 is our superintendent's report. Mr. Frederickson.
Normally be a time that, this would normally be a time that we would talk about our upcoming events, all of our school events, and I'm so disappointed because this is the part that I always enjoy so much, and the excitement of the school year and the kickoffs and so on. But we're going to try to make the show go on. We are going to have our welcome back meeting for all of our staff on Thursday. It's going to be through Zoom or online, but we are, we're still looking forward to that. We want to, I think, what time more than now that is it needed for us as an organization to come together and talk about our vision and, just face some of the challenges that we're all facing together. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity. That will be on Thursday. There will also be opportunities for training. Mrs. Granger's staff has been very busy putting that together, and some very meaningful opportunities for our staff to have training and also to collaborate in a safe manner, of course. And so that's our most, that'll be our most recent, our upcoming event. Again, our start of school is on Monday the 10th. And whew, boy, it's hard to believe. Yeah, I know. Here we go. Less than a week away. And we are optimistic that it is going to be a good start. And again, like I mentioned in my first report, there will be hurdles and little glitches, but I feel like we're ready to go. But that's really right now the upcoming events that I would discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Item 11, or excuse me, 13 is item for future agendas. If any of you would like to add an item to a future agenda, you can either email me or email Mrs. Silva. We'll make sure that we reach out to you and make sure that that item gets agendized. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We wish you all well. And Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Rod. Just 5 seconds, please. Mr. Frederickson, I would like to thank and congratulate you on completing your first full regular meeting with our district. Thank you so much. Buckle up. Here we go.
Here we go. It's a ride.
Very good. We're appreciative of all of you. All of you stay safe out there, stay healthy and strong, and practice good living there. All right. Bless you all and good night. And this meeting is adjourned.